On the first day, I remember telling you that I shall not be able to give you what you have come here to take. But I would try to explain what it is that you really want. If you want something, then the basis is that you are the subject and what you want becomes the object. And this that you are wanting, why you have come here for, call it the word I like best is understanding. They call it enlightenment, they call it self-realization. But this understanding that I am talking about, that understanding is not something you can get. Because that understanding which you really want is the pure subject. So what you want as a subject, wanting an object, the subject-object relationship cannot happen. What really is that there is pure subjectivity. And what we really are in phenomenality are an object. So, what is happening is the object called the human being wants to know the pure subjectivity, which is impossible. In fact, my definition of the original sin is this: the object usurping the subjectivity of the pure subject, and what is worse, turning pure subjectivity into an object which the pseudo-subject wants to know. That's a bit difficult to understand. Let me repeat. If you want to know mathematics, then you are the subject, mathematics is the object, and the subject can know the object. When you know mathematics, you can say, I know my mathematics. But here, what is happening is, the human being is a created object, and the created object wants to know God. Call it God, call it consciousness, call it awareness, call it oneness, whatever it is. So, the impossible situation is that the object is trying to know the subject. So the object has to be the subject. So the object usurps the subjectivity of the pure subject and turns the pure subject into an object which the pseudo-subject can understand. And that is why it is impossible. That is why, if there is something as an original sin, this is it. The object usurping the subjectivity of pure subject and turning the pure subjectivity into an object which the pseudo-subject can know. And I also told you, but I would try to help you to understand what it is that you really want. You think you want to be self-realized. You think you want to have enlightenment. That is not really what you want. So I did promise to show you what it is that you really want. What you, as the created object with an ego, what you really want. What you really want is usually termed happiness. But this happiness that you want is of a special type. The usual happiness is always attached to unhappiness. Because happiness and unhappiness are the basis of life as we know it in manifestation, phenomenality. The basis of phenomenality is opposites. Therefore, you cannot have happiness without the attached unhappiness. But what you're really trying to get is that unhappiness which is not attached to unhappiness. And that is the problem. But you do have experience, or more accurately, there is experience of exactly this kind of happiness not attached to unhappiness, which I prefer to call peace. You have experience of that peace, or I repeat again to be more accurate, there is experience of that peace which you want, and that experience happens in deep sleep. In deep sleep, there is peace. And that is why one would rather not be disturbed in his sleep. Once you wake up, you are in phenomenality, and whatever happiness you seek by way of money, power, or whatever fame, whatever, is combined with unhappiness. But the happiness, the peace which you get in deep sleep is not attached to unhappiness. Because in peace, there is no duality. It is not phenomenality. There is no, in fact, that peace exists only because the desirer of the peace, the me, the one who wants anything, the wanter is not there, the me is not there, therefore the peace exists. So, what you really want is to have the peace which prevails in deep sleep also to exist in the waking state, when you are doing your normal life. That is what you really want. The peace which exists in deep sleep, you want that peace to exist in the waking state when you are doing your normal work, which may seem apparently impossible, but it is possible. It is possible if you analyze the situation and find out why is it that the peace in deep sleep exists. The peace in deep sleep exists because there is no me wanting anything, not having to do anything to get that experience. In fact, that experience of peace happens simply because there is absence of the me. So the same kind of peace can prevail in the waking state when you are doing your normal work. Now, more accurately, I should say, that kind of peace can prevail even during your waking state, not when you are doing your work, but when the normal work which you consider your work takes place. If you think, and one does, that without one doing one's job, there will be chaos in the world. But when you are in deep sleep, there is no chaos in the world goes on. That's why I gave an example. A chief executive who thinks the whole organization runs on his working from 9 to 5, goes on leave, he's unpleasantly surprised to get back and find that the organization has been running equally well, if not better. You see? So, it is possible for the work which you think is your work to get on perfectly well without your thinking that you are doing it. And to that extent, if it is possible for you to live your life with the firm conviction that you are not living your life, you are not doing the work that you are doing, but that life is being lived. The work that you think you were doing is being done. So if that is the firm possible conclusion you can come to, the total conviction that you are not doing anything, work is being done. In other words, that which functions through your body-mind organism, which you consider your body-mind organism, that which functions is the very thing which functions through every human being. Exactly like electricity functions through every electrical gadget, producing that which each electrical gadget has been designed for. So electricity functions through an electrical bulb, brings out light. Electricity functions through a kitchen gadget and produces the mixture of whatever the electrical gadget is designed for. But in the electric bulb and the kitchen gadget, there is no ego to say, I produce the light, I produce the mixture. That's the only difference. Believe me, that is the only difference. So each work that happens through each human being, instead of electricity, what functions is impersonal consciousness, impersonal energy. Electricity could be considered as one aspect of the same impersonal universal energy. Electricity producing what the electrical gadget is supposed to produce, and the impersonal energy producing through every human gadget what each human gadget has been uniquely programmed to produce. That is all that is happening. So, what we call a sage is a phenomenon where there is the usual human body, but there is no ego with a sense of personal doership. In other words, the sage is totally, unconditionally convinced that what brings about an action through a body-mind organism which he calls his own is not he, but the impersonal energy. That impersonal energy which makes the man say, I am, I exist. It is the same impersonal energy which makes every human being say with conviction, total conviction, unconditional conviction, I am, I exist. But what is wrong is that each man considers further, I am, I exist, I do. That's where the thing goes wrong. And yet, that is exactly what is supposed to happen. So, I do is the ego. And without the ego, interhuman relationships wouldn't happen. Without interhuman relationships, life wouldn't happen. So, for life to happen, the Leela to happen, God's game to happen, the source had to create egos in the human objects. And the only thing that happens is when this is totally realized, that there is no me living my life, but that life is being lived through that apparatus which I call mine. This is really so simple. That is why Ramana Maharshi says several places, self-realization is the easiest thing. Self-realization is the easiest thing. When you realize that there is no one to achieve self-realization. That is the only thing to be understood. There is no me to achieve self-realization. The only thing to be understood is, I am not living my life. Life is being lived through me by the same impersonal energy which is living life through every body-mind organism. That is all that is to be understood. But even that understanding is not in your control. Is not in your control because frankly there is no you. The whole thing is that simple. So when this understanding happens, and why does it happen? Because God or consciousness or the source, whatever you call it, had to create the ego for life as we know it to happen. And at the same time, God started the process of demolishing the ego in a limited number of cases. Why? Because if there is a me who is not a sage, which is most of the people, there had to be an opposite. Phenomenality means opposites. So having created the ego, God was compelled to create the sage. It is so simple. The moment God created the ego, God had to create, on the other hand, a sage. Meaning, some cases at least, where the sense of personal doership had been demolished. That is why I say a Mother Teresa and a psychopathic organism have always existed throughout time. And that is not in your control. But the fact is that there have always been people, human beings, body-mind organisms, which have been so programmed, which have been so designed, that this kind of seeking, which will lead to a sage, has been happening. Therefore, this process has always gone on. The biggest impediment to this simplest of things happening, as Ramana Maharshi said, is the simplest thing, is that instead of seeing this as a pair of opposites, the me is coming into the world and the sage is also getting into the world in adequate proportions which only God knows. That has been happening. The problem arises because, as I said, the seeker begins the seeking with the mistaken notion that he or she will achieve enlightenment as an object which would give him or her enormous happiness. And the initial mistake is that any happiness which the seeker can get will not be unaccompanied by unhappiness. So, the seeking begins with the seeker seeking enlightenment as an object of happiness and ends only with the realization that he never has been a seeker. He never has been a doer of anything. That the doing has been happening. The seeking has been happening. And the result, or how long the process is going to be, is not in anyone's control. So because of the frustration which the seeker is bound to have, when he tries various practices, various means, and finds that there is no change, he is still a seeker. He is still, what he is seeking is still as far away as he can see. Then, for that frustration, Ramana Maharshi gives, out of his infinite compassion, a solace, a consolation. He says, that you have been a seeker, that you have been a spiritual seeker, is itself God's will, God's grace. He puts it in a picturesque way. Your head is already in the tiger's mouth. That you are a seeker is not your achievement. That you are a seeker is itself God's will, God's compassion. From the individual point of view, the individual, what he says is, to the individual, that you are a seeker is God's grace. God's grace, God's will are really the same thing. But the human beings use the words God's grace and God's will slightly differently. Something good happens to us, we say God's grace. I break a leg, and then there's some kind of knowledge, so I put my head down, God's will. But otherwise, it's all God's will. So that we are seekers, that you are all seekers, is itself God's will. And if that is acceptable, then the answer is fairly simple. Answer is, let God do His business. He doesn't need your help. The more help you want to give, the more the obstruction. You have body work done on you, massage. You see, the moment the masher presses a muscle, the muscle involuntarily resists. It wants to help. So the masher, I've seen many of them tell him, don't help, don't help. So God is shouting all the time, don't help. You see? Don't help. But we don't listen to him. Don't help. Any help that you want to give to God is an obstruction. Let him do his job. And what do I do? You do your job. And in the meantime, if it's God's will and the destiny of that body-mind organism, at some point, the thought will occur, am I really doing the job, or are things happening? Is action that I call really my action, or is it just happening? And then you come to the conclusion on investigation from personal experience that no action has really been my action. And when that happens, you really let God do his work. That is why Ramana Maharshi says self-realization is so simple. And that is, self-realization is one of the events happening as part of phenomenality. God is not doing you a favor by making you a seeker. God is just going about his business. If he has created the ego, he has got to destroy some of the egos. So the creation of the ego has always been accompanied, ever since time began, with the creation of sages. That is why I said, all I can do is to try to make you understand that you cannot achieve enlightenment. It can only happen if it is God's will. So, if you have any questions to ask, please ask them. And if there are personal questions you want to ask, you are most welcome. I shall try to answer them as honestly as I can.
Ramesh,
yes.
you always say the picture or the film is already ready. My
yes.
feeling sometimes is the picture and the film is created by life from moment to moment. How do you know that it is already ready?
You see, from moment to moment is for the character in the movie. The character in the movie, for him, the movie is not, he can't accept that it is done. For him it is from moment to moment. But if we are watching the movie, even watching the movie, it is from moment to moment. We don't know what is at the end of a movie. But the whole movie, unless of course it is a TV serial,
yes.
then it can go on and on and on. The Bold and the Beautiful, I think, has been going on for 20 years. And it will probably go on for another 20 years, because that is man-made. But this divine movie is already there. If that is a bit difficult for you to understand, let me give you another example.
Please.
Supposing a painter has painted a painting 10 miles long, 2 stories high. Painting is there. Other people who have gone to the 10 miles have told you. It is there. I've seen the whole 10 miles. That is what the sage has told you. But you want to see the painting, and if you're a real painter yourself and you're interested in painting, you will take time over bits and pieces. So by the time you do the 10-mile long painting, it will take time. That's why time has come into being. But the painting is already there. And that is exactly what Lord Krishna tells Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. Even if you do not fight, these people arraigned in front of you as your enemies are not going to live. I have already killed them. As time, I have already killed them. And you can only be the apparent instrument, the destiny of which is to kill some of them. You see? So the movie is already there. And I think more people than you can imagine have that feeling deep down that it's all there. Or at least the feeling that what is going to happen to me or someone else sometime later is really not in my control. Many have that feeling.
Yes, this I can understand. Because
I'm sorry?
This I can understand.
Yes.
I have not in control.
So, I mean, if this you can understand,
Yes.
then the basis of it is the same thing. I have always had the feeling of absolute certainty that what is going to happen to me 20 years later, I have no control over it. That is the point. Who has control over it is irrelevant. So really, prevailing of God's will is irrelevant. God's will, whose will? Irrelevant. What is relevant? My will is not going to prevail.
Yeah.
So that I personally have always had that feeling, ever since I was a child. You see?
Yes, this.
Now, that has it prevented me from doing my best? It hasn't. Why? I'm sorry, your name is?
Irene.
Carolina?
Irena.
Irena.
Yes.
I see. So, Irena, that is what the mind suddenly says. Well, if you know nothing is going to, that everything is there, how can you work? That would be the question the mind asks. How can you work?
It's easy.
And again, the real answer is the real position. I don't work. Even my working is not in my control. So because there is the total acceptance that what is going to happen in future is not in my hands, the energy functioning through this body-mind organism will only work according to the way this body-mind organism has been designed, the way it has been programmed. And if this body-mind organism has been programmed to be restless and impatient, that is how the energy will function. So if this body-mind organism has been programmed to be restless and continuously doing something, that will happen, irrespective of the fact that I have the total conviction that whatever is going to come to me, no power on earth can take away. And if something is not going to come, no power on earth can give it to me. That was my firm conviction. And in many ways, it helped me in my career. The one way it really did help me in my career is this. I saw people, cheating, harming people, going to the bosses with tales about so-and-so, he is a bad man, that's a good man, he is doing, carrying tales to the superiors, trying to show that they are good people, trying to butter up their superiors. Seeing that, I knew it was not necessary. You see? But I repeat, that did not prevent me from doing whatever I could as an assistant in the hierarchy, doing my best to make the job of my superior easier. That didn't prevent. I did that. And because I did that, somehow I've always had an excellent relationship with my bosses. I didn't have to go out of my way to do that. And because I had this feeling that whatever I had to get, I will get, it saved me a lot of energy trying to do what others were doing, which I've just described. Hating each other, trying to put difficulties in the way of each other, of their whom they consider their competitors. All this I didn't have to do. So that much energy was saved, which could go into doing whatever I could to make the job of my senior, superior officer easier, any way that I could. Let me give you an extraordinarily simple example. My own experience was that a boss really appreciates more than anything else the genuine desire of the assistant to make his job easier. That is my personal experience. What the boss appreciates in a junior is the genuine desire of the junior or the assistant to make his life easier. And it's the simplest of ways that can be done. Let me give you again a simplest of examples. At a particular time, the general manager of my bank decided to have four personal assistants in each section. The area was limited. So he took me as one of his assistants for a personal kind of job. Probably because of the same attitude, he found a degree of honesty in me. He probably felt that this is one man who is not take advantage of the information that is going to come to him by being so close to the boss. Anyway, there was not enough space, so I had to sit at a long table in the same room as the general manager. Customers went and saw the general manager, talked to them about their business. I was present. So once or twice people hesitated, seeing there's someone else sitting there. So the general manager was kind enough to tell in front of me, talk to me as if he is not there. He is not going to, he is no problem. You see, then on one occasion I noticed that he was a director of another company, a small company, not well known. It wanted to remain small. So that company did not have its telephone number in the telephone directory. They kept it private. So my general manager had that number in a diary. And my general manager was not the most methodical person I have known. His table used to be a mess. So I could help him. See, once I tried to make it more, and then I noticed that I was not helping him, just as I'm not helping God in trying to. His table looked a mess to me, but he knew exactly where his paper was. So I stopped clearing his desk. But I noticed that when he wanted that number, particular number, he looked about his diary was all over the place. So once when he got that number from the diary and called out loudly so that I could get him the number, when he called the number loudly, I'm telling you the simplest of things. All I did was jot down the number when he was calling out. And after the job was done and he went for lunch, all I did was to put that number down in the telephone directory, which is his own, in his room, on his table. No one else from outside would come and dare to come and look at that telephone directory. All I did was put that number, which was not printed in the telephone directory, at the appropriate place. I put it down. Next time he wanted, he said, "Oh, where's that damn..." His language was pretty poor. "Where is that damn language? Where is that damn telephone number?" So I said, "It's in the book." So he said, "Ramesh, it is not in the book." So I said, "Sir, it is there now." So he looked at me, and he looked it up, and just gave me a look of such admiration. Not thankfulness so much, as such admiration. What genius! To put the number down, which I could have done and didn't do, and he puts the number down. You see, so my point is this. I continued to get promotions regularly. When I joined the bank, I had a degree from the Bombay University, I had a degree from the London University in banking, but when I joined the bank, the directors had taken a policy decision. Everybody must start at the lowest level and then earn there. So I had to join as a clerk at the lowest level. Of course, as soon as there was a next chance for promotion, I was promoted. And since then I got my promotions regularly. And every time I got the promotion, higher and higher, every time a thought wouldn't escape me. Why have I got this promotion? There's so-and-so who is far more intelligent than I am. There's so-and-so far more hard-working than I am. But I could continue to get them. And the irony of it is that those who didn't get the promotion thought that I did all kinds of things to incur favor from my bosses, which was exactly the opposite. I knew that my promotions no one can stop, so I did do my best to help as I said, but nothing out of the way to pamper him or to spoil him. Now that kind of a feeling I always had. So my important point that I'm saying is that the whole picture is ready. For me, that is a feeling I had for no reason. But the important point is that it is not whose will prevails, but the point is my will doesn't prevail. And the whole thing is based on 4 words in the Bible. Thy will be done. Nobody dares refuse that, but conveniently puts it aside. Every religion says the same thing. Thy will be done. But they are afraid to accept it, because then the mind says, if you accept that nothing is in your control, you will not be able to do your best. But the point is, you are not doing your best or worst. It is the impersonal energy functioning through each human being, human body, producing exactly that which that body, mind, organism has been designed and programmed to produce. And what is produced will have consequences, strictly according to God's will and the destiny of that body-mind organism. That is why I give the example constantly. Until last year, we had a body-mind organism called Mother Teresa, so programmed that only good deeds happen. So the happening of the good deeds was not Mother Teresa's actions, but the actions which were destined to happen through a body-mind organism called Mother Teresa. And the consequences of those actions, Nobel Prize, awards, rewards, was also the destiny of that body-mind organism. That is one extreme. At the other extreme, there is a psychopathic organism, so programmed and designed that evil deeds happen. So the happening of the evil deeds was the destiny of that body-mind organism, and the consequences, the body-mind organism being executed or put in jail or put in an asylum, was also the destiny of that body-mind organism. Both were created by the same source.
Yes, I can feel that it is this way. If I look on my life, I have always this feeling that I'm not the creator of it.
You have to come to that conclusion. That is why I say investigate. If investigating your whole life is too long a process, investigate at the end of the day just the actions which have happened on that day. But investigate and you must come to the conclusion.
Thank you, Ramesh, because your conception has the most beautiful clarity for me. Thank you.
Most welcome.
When you speak of the source, can you explain a bit better what you mean by it?
The source? The source is one without the second. That alone, one, which has existed all the time and will continue to exist all the time. And anything else that appears to our senses, recognized by our senses, have come from that one source.
But you can't explain where it came from.
He is the source. The source. You see? And that's so. The Hindu scriptures give a very beautiful example of the source producing the manifestation. They give the example of a spider producing a web. The spider produces a web not from material outside of itself. There is no material outside of itself where the source is concerned, which the source can use to bring about the manifestation. So the spider produces the web from its own saliva, and when it is not needed, it takes it back. So the source is the source from which everything else has appeared. Yes.
For clarification, I'd like to ask you, Ramesh, talking about the source, I understand all comes from the source, manifestation of the worlds, and this manifestation is a form or has many thousand forms, and form means duality and means opposites and all this stuff. You call it the movie, the universal movie. And is this appearance of duality already the ego, or is it is the ego what you call the individual doership? I'd like to have a word on this.
I'm sorry?
I'd like to have your word on this.
You would like to have?
Your word, your explanation on this.
My explanation?
Yes.
You want an explanation from a created object, like you. This is a created object. You want an explanation from a created object about why the creator, subject, has done something what it has done.
No.
How can a created object tell you why the creator, subject, has done what it has done?
No, this is not the point.
I think that is the point.
I'd like to know if what we regard as duality is identical with the ego, or is the ego something else?
No. You see, the duality is the expression of the unicity. Unicity is the source. Whether you call it, I kept repeating, whether it is the source, whether you call it unicity, whether you call it impersonal energy, potential energy, or God, makes no difference. But the duality manifestation has come from the unicity, that is from the source. And the basis of manifestation is the existing of opposites. When you call something beautiful, you have already decided something is ugly. When you call something good, you have already decided something is evil. Otherwise, the word good and the beautiful have no meaning.
That means if I realize
Yes.
that there is duality or there are opposites,
Yes.
that's already an egoistic decision.
That is, the ego can understand it or not. The ego is able to accept it or not able to accept it. Very often the ego is not able to accept it. That is why we have misery. What the ego wants is happiness, but not unhappiness. Only the beauty, not the ugliness. Only health, not disease. So the ego chooses one against the other, does not accept the duality, does not accept the polarity or opposites, and therefore becomes unhappy. So when that is accepted, that there has to be duality, that the very life is based on opposites, and there is acceptance, then there is much less unhappiness.
But what can the ego do without being identified with a plus and minus and good and bad?
The ego does not exist. The ego is a creation by divine hypnosis. And the ego is merely a creation, a fiction.
I think I got you. There is no distinction. Is that right?
The ego is merely a fiction created by divine hypnosis, so that among egos there can be interhuman relationships. Respect, enmity, friendship, enmity, hate, love, which is the basis of life as we know it. So for the Leela or the game of God or life as we know it to happen, interhuman relationships have to happen. And for interhuman relationships to happen, egos have to be created. And for the egos having been created, the opposite, the destruction, the process of destruction of the ego is going on at the same time as part of the duality in phenomenality.
That would mean actually nothing is happening. Nothing is happening.
That is quite correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Which is what is happening in your deep sleep. What happens in your deep sleep? Nothing. You see, that is why I say what you really want and do not appreciate is that peace in the waking state which prevails in deep sleep. You see, And in deep sleep that prevails because the ego is not there. So if the ego can be made absent in the waking state, in daily life, there will be the same peace which exists in deep sleep. And the ego is destroyed when there is the final unconditional acceptance that the ego does not exist as the doer. The basis of ego, the very essence of the ego is a sense of personal doership. So if you are convinced that there is nothing you can do, nobody can do, in other words, if you are convinced of the Buddha's words, deeds are done, but no individual doer thereof, then you are a sage. Then you don't blame anybody for anything that happens.
You won't have anybody.
I'm sorry?
You won't have anybody to blame.
That is correct, because there is no body, except there is no one except the body.
Is there, yes, I have a question. Is there any possibility for the human being as an object to experience or to witness the subjectivity?
I'm sorry, can you say that again, please?
Is there any possibility?
Is there any possibility
for the human being
for a human being
as an object
to
experience or to witness the subjectivity?
To experience?
To experience or to witness the subjectivity of the source.
Now you tell me, you paint a picture, and in that painting you have a figure. The figure is the object, you are the subject. Tell me, is it possible for the figure you have painted to experience the subjectivity of the painter? That is your question to me.
But if everything is consciousness,
yes.
And I'm a part of consciousness.
No, you are not part of the consciousness. You are merely a creation created by divine hypnosis. What you mean is, are you other than consciousness? No. Consciousness is all there is. You see?
So this body-mind organism is a part of it.
Body-mind organism is one species of object. The human being is one species of object which, along with thousands of other species of objects, together constitute the totality of manifestation. The human being is one species of object which, along with other thousands of species of objects on land, air and water, millions of species, together constitute the totality of manifestation. So how can an object know the subjectivity? It's impossible. Just as impossible as a figure which you have painted being able to know why you painted the picture.
My question refers to my own experience and also to that what said Ramana Maharshi.
Yes.
When he said in meditation, when the second eye or the double eye appears.
Yes.
How would you explain that?
What he means is that you know why the double eye and the single eye has to be done? Because the double eye means the I in English language and the single eye means the me. The English language, one of the very few languages which makes this distinction between I and me. The Tamil in which he spoke didn't have this. So he had to use the word I for the me. So in order to distinguish the I as the me from the I as the subjectivity, he used the double I. I for subjectivity, and I for the me.
But you also told about the merging of the two eyes.
Gurjev.
The merging.
Merging. You see, the merging is a wrong word. The me disappears. The me does not merge with the I. The me disappears. When the me understands that there has never been a me, the me disappears. In fact, therefore, I am is the truth. Your name is?
Dirk. D-I-R-K. Dirk.
Dirk. So, I am is the truth, which is hidden by Dirk. I am is the truth, which is hidden by Dirk.
But there is also Dirk, or Dirk, who is witnessing this experience.
No, he isn't.
But I can remember.
Yes, you can remember.
Well, there is a remembering.
Because the memory has been infused into this body-mind object. But what does the witnessing is the impersonal energy. You see, there is a big difference between observing and witnessing. Observing, it is still semantics. The words have been used. But observing is generally taken to mean observing by an individual ego. So the ego observes something and the ego judges it as something good or bad, beautiful or ugly. But when the witnessing happens, in that witnessing, nothing is judged. And therefore, the most popular example of witnessing is given that of a baby witnessing things.
Okay, that gives me clarity if you say that the witnessing is an impersonal.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Witnessing is impersonal, observing is personal, and therefore the personal observer, the moment he observes something, judges them as good or bad. Witnessing impersonal, everything is impersonal.
Would you agree that the main characteristic of the ego is thought and fear?
I'm sorry, please say that again.
Would you agree that the main characteristic of the ego
Yes.
is thought and fear?
The main characteristic of the ego is to observe and judge. The main characteristic of the ego is to observe and judge and select one against the other. And therefore, it is the ego who is happy or unhappy. Yes.
How do we know about the source?
How do we?
How do we know about the source?
I'm sorry, I don't know.
How do we know about the source?
How do we know the cause?
No, the source.
About the source.
The source.
How do we know about the source?
Yeah.
It's a concept. That's the whole point. That's how we began. How can an object know the source? So therefore, the very first time what I'm saying is, whatever I'm saying is a concept. A concept being something which some people may accept, some people may not be able to accept. Therefore, I go to the extent of saying anything said by any sage at any time, whether it was Jesus Christ or Moses or Ramana Maharshi or Ramakrishna, whatever anybody has said is a concept, acceptable to some, not acceptable to others. What is more, anything which any scripture of any religion has said is a concept. So concepts of one religion are not acceptable to other religions. Therefore, we have religious wars. So no concept is truth. There is only one truth. That truth which no one can deny. Only that is the truth which no one can deny. And that truth is, I am, I exist. I am is the truth. But I am John or Jane is not the truth. John or Jane is the ego, the divine hypnosis, which is the ignorance which covers the truth. And when that ignorance disappears, with the total conviction that there is no me as the doer, there is no John or Jane as the doer, then the ignorance is wiped out and the truth shines in all its brilliance. So there is no question of achieving anything. If something is happening, it is the wiping out of the ego or the ignorance. And that wiping out can only happen if it is the will of the source.
I have another question. When you say the ego is an illusion,
The ego is an illusion.
isn't
Yes.
it a creation like other things in the manifestation?
Sure, but that creation, a creation which is not perceptible to the senses.
So all things of manifestation are illusion?
Everything is an illusion, but in that illusion, some things are perceptible to the senses, some are not.
But they are all an illusion.
They are all an illusion, yes.
Thank you.
This may suit to what just was asked. I have written my question down because it's too complex for me to repeat it. My mind is not so ordered. I have to read it.
Oh, read it by all means. You don't have to excuse yourself for reading. Read it by all means. Maybe better for both of us.
I didn't understand what you said.
Only thing is,
yeah.
if you are reading, read it slowly.
Yes, I try. So I had a dream last night. The dream is not important, but I woke up and I was a little bit puzzled. I felt a little bit like Huang Tzu when he was dreaming being a butterfly. Do you know this story about Huang Tzu? And
I think it was Chuang-Tzu.
Yes.
Chuang-Tzu's dream
Yes.
about being a butterfly.
Yes.
Yes, what about that?
Yeah, it's coming close to that, maybe.
So same dream happened to you, you mean?
Maybe. Okay, I wrote it down then.
Yes.
Dear Ramesh, I'd like to come back to something I heard you saying yesterday, that there is no objective world existing, really. If not, at least a sentient being would perceive it, or other hand, I may perceive, this was first. On the other hand, I may perceive in the dreaming state a world which only I can perceive and nobody else. But while I was dreaming, this world looks as real as the world we perceive in the waking state, even though the waking state is taken as a proof that the dreamed world was an illusion. Did you get it so far? So, the difference between the dreaming state and the waking state seems to be that what is perceived is not only perceived by me, but in the same time also by other sentient beings. This means we confirm each other the existence of the world in the waking state, even though it is an illusion, as the world in the dreaming state. This would mean the world of the waking state is just a social agreement. Is this funny? I don't know.
Have you finished?
No,
you turned the
not
page, so I
yet.
thought you were going.
I turned. I'm sorry. The scientists of the past said that the proof for the existence of the world would be that it can be perceived, but the contrary seems to be the case. Because our senses perceive the world, we believe that this world would be real, even though we have no evidence that the body and the senses are real. Do I understand you or interpret you correctly?
Can you put that in a question? Or let me put it and you tell me whether I've got it right or wrong.
Yes, please.
What you are saying, I think, is that in your personal dream was as real to you as this waking state is in the waking state.
Yes.
That is what you're saying. Your personal dream, while you were dreaming, was as real to you as this waking state when you are in the waking state. That is correct. Both are dreams.
Yes.
One is a personal dream being dreamt in your personal consciousness. Consciousness identified with this body. And this waking dream is happening in the universal consciousness, which prevails everywhere.
But I think everybody here agrees that it's more difficult to accept that the waking dream is a dream.
Yes, but if when you in your personal dream you believe that dream to be real, therefore why should you have difficulty in believing this dream to be real when you are dreaming it? In fact, the similarity between the two dreams, everything that exists in the waking state exists in the dream state. Rivers and mountains, babies being born, babies dying, diseased babies, handicapped children, religious wars going on. Everything that happens in the personal dream, in the living dream, also happens in the personal dream. So in essence, there is no difference. That is the whole point.
Thank you.
Just as you believe that your personal dream while you are dreaming is correct, then you must believe that this that is going on is also as real as your personal dream or as unreal as your personal dream.
Thank you.
Most welcome.
I want to ask about something you wrote in Who Cares?
Yes.
When the trust of God's will is lost, and also this might be God's will, then comes compassion and kindness into being. You write there.
Yes.
What do you mean? That compassion is in any case for a seeker always a self-centered...
What I meant there is this. When faith in God is lost, that's what I say, isn't it?
Yes.
Faith in God means faith in the one source. So when faith in the one source is lost, the individual comes in. And the individual says, I am compassionate. I am helping him.
Yes.
You see?
So always, compassion is always self-centered activity.
Is individual.
Yeah,
Faith in God means let God do whatever He wants. In some cases He does good things, in some cases He does bad things. But so when faith in God is lost, compassion and kindness.
Yes.
When compassion and kindness come in. But at least in that stage, compassion and kindness as an individual, you say, I must be compassionate and kind. I must do kind things. So when compassion and kindness is lost, what happens?
Then rules come into being.
Then rules come in.
Yeah.
You see, the individual says, I must be kind and no problem. But when compassion and kindness is lost, then rules come in. You must do this, you must not do that.
But sometimes compassion comes into being just like that without any reason.
Yes, but then that is not the individual. Then that is not the individual. What I'm saying is when faith in God is lost, the individual comes in with compassion and kindness in the beginning. When compassion and kindness are lost, he comes in with rules and regulations. You see? And when rules and regulations have certain, then religion comes in. Rules and regulations, the religion has routines. And when the routines change and differ, religious wars happen. That's what I've said there, I think. Most welcome.
Two days ago, in the very first beginning in the morning, in the space before a mind comes up and works, it was very clear, happiness makes fear. And it goes on and on and on until now. Please would you tell me something about that? Happiness makes fear?
I'm sorry, I haven't understood it.
She's saying
Yes.
that her experience was that with happiness there comes fear.
Yes.
No, that's not correct, no. In the morning, 2 days ago, in the space before mind comes up and works. Not an experience, not a message. I don't know what it was, only happiness makes fear.
With happiness came fear? Is that what you're saying?
Happiness makes fear.
So happiness arose and along with that the fear. Is that what you're saying? There was a sense of happiness, along with that a sense of fear?
No, it wasn't happiness creates fear or happiness and fear. Happiness makes fear, and I don't understand it. But it goes on and on until now. And
It will create fear.
You see, happiness...
maybe that...
No, what I'm saying is, happiness is there. Then there is the fear that happiness which is there now may not last. At the moment, there is happiness. But the fear arises, this happiness which I have now, I want it to last forever. But it may not. That is the fear. And why is the fear? Because your experience is that happiness gives way to unhappiness.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I have a personal question. There's much saying about sex in life, sex between wife and women, and some sages say, let's say,
Look, would you mind standing up? Now yes. I mean, everybody else heard it, but I didn't. I would like to share in the laughter. I like laughter.
Excuse the question. But the thing is,
that's better.
I'm just not clear with the point. Some say don't make sex, and others say make sex as much as you can, and there's no clearness for me.
Yes.
So I'm really interested whether you gave me an idea about this.
Look, yes. How much sex you are able to have will depend on two things. On two things. Your programming and your destiny. You see, you may be programmed not to have too much sex. You may have plenty of opportunities, but you won't have it. So it is the destiny of a jackrabbit in South Arizona, which I mentioned, to have lots of sex.
I have a question.
Please.
You told us with the me, the duality. With the me, the duality came
That's
in
right.
the world.
Yes.
And in a case of a sage,
Yes.
there is no longer a me.
That is correct.
So for you, that is a personal question, there is no duality. So you
No. You see, the duality exists. And for the functioning of that duality, the ego was necessary to be created. The duality exists. The ego was necessary to choose between the duality. So what the sage does is, he accepts the duality. He doesn't choose between one and the other. He accepts the duality. He accepts that happiness will go with unhappiness. So all that the sage does is accept the duality. The ego does not accept the duality. He chooses one against the other.
So for you is also, it's good and bad for you is also in the world.
They exist, sure. So for me, I can see that. I can see a handsome man, I can see an ugly man. I can see a good picture as I see it, according to my perceptions, which is according to my programming, and I can see a picture which doesn't appeal to me.
So you are also judging.
Sorry?
You are also judging. Beurteilen,
You see,
werten.
the judging happens in the sense that the mind reacts to something, and the reaction of the mind is according to the programming. So if the programming is for a person to be a vegetarian, so if a sage walks along the road and he sees legs of mutton hanging on by the roadside, a feeling of aversion could certainly arise. A feeling of aversion could certainly arise. But the ego not being there, the ego will not say, the ego not being, the one who eats that is a bad person. That will not happen. The aversion is merely the reaction of the brain to an input. The input is seeing something, and the input to bring out an output according to the programming. Therefore, an aversion for meat, which is hanging outside, could arise. You see? But the ego doesn't get involved in saying, this shouldn't happen, people should be vegetarians, why should we kill innocent animals? That kind of involvement doesn't happen in the absence of the ego. In any case, the judging by the working mind will continue. Even in the case of a sage, the working by the judging mind continues. Because the judging mind, the nature of the judging mind is to decide. And in the decision, the judging has to be, this is right, this is wrong, this will be successful, that will not be successful. And in not only that, in saying if there are two people, he has to assign a job to one of them. Then the judging will happen. This man is good for this job, that man is not. that judging will be done by the working mind. In fact, the working mind will say, there are two people, A and B, to whom I can give this job. I like A, but I will give the job to B, whom I do not like, because for this job, B is the best man. So this judging, selection, will be done by the working mind. Even the planning will have to be done. By a sage, even a planning will have to be done, and that planning will be by the working mind. Suppose a sage has to catch a plane. The flying time is midnight. Reporting time is 10 o'clock. So the sage will have to plan. To be there at the airport at 10 o'clock, I will have to leave here at 9 o'clock. Therefore, I must eat at 8 o'clock. I must have my packing done by 7 o'clock. All that is planning. It is done by the mind. Even the sage has to do the planning. But that is the working mind. But having done the planning, there may not be further question of worrying by the thinking mind. What if the plane doesn't go? What if the plane crashes? That kind of a worry will not happen. The working mind will function. And the functioning of the working mind means choosing and judging and planning. So it is not as if the sage doesn't plan. On the contrary, an irresponsible man may not do any judging or planning. Yes.
I have a question about this dreaming. These personal dreams ends when I wake up.
Yes.
What about this other dream? Is it ever going to end?
You see, the personal dream ends when you wake up and realize that it was a dream. Isn't it?
Mm.
When does the dream really end? When you wake up and realize that it was only a dream. And this waking dream also ends when there is the understanding that no one is doing anything. That it is all happening because of God's will. So that understanding is the waking up from this waking dream. In the personal dream, there is a physical waking up. In this waking up, there is no physical waking up. That's the only difference. But you wake up when you realize that this is a dream.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Raméš, would you mind to tell us about your precious moments where you got the final understanding?
Yes. Yes. It happened almost a year after I started going to Maharaj. The exact incident is this. There's a day in the Hindu calendar, festivity called Deepavali or Diwali. Have you heard of it? They call the festival of lights. It has a long story behind all Hindu mythologies. But on that day is a holiday, public holiday. So on that public holiday, when the first year I went to Maharaj, the tradition was that about 10 or 12 people would come, disciples would come and clean up Maharaj's room once a year. So on that day, Maharaj didn't hold his satsang. Next year, one of my friends, he suggested to Maharaj, instead of not having a satsang at all, why not have a satsang at his place, which was just a few 10 minutes away. Maharaj says, yes, why not? That's a good idea. So we had his satsang at my friend's place, some 10 minutes away. So my friend who was also used to translate, I used to translate. How it turned out. Sometimes he would translate, sometimes I would translate. That particular Diwali day, he was busy receiving guests and seating them. So he asked me whether I would translate. I said, yes, certainly, with pleasure. So I was doing the translating. And at a certain point, what happened was, the translation had a certain time element. Maharaj would speak, then my mind had to assimilate what it said and translate it into English. It was fairly quick, but nonetheless, there was a time element. That morning, somehow I found that the translation was becoming more and more spontaneous. It was so spontaneous that I knew what Maharaj was going to say. And according to my natural impatience, I was waiting for Maharaj to finish. Why doesn't the old man say it? So that I can get on with the translation. So the translation was becoming more and more spontaneous. And what is more, I could feel that the translation couldn't have been better. It was a beautiful translation. And I say it was beautiful because I wasn't doing it. And that was noticed by my host, and it was noticed by Maharaj also. So at the end of the talk, my friend said, "You were in great form today." You see? And as far as Maharaj's reaction was concerned, up to then, not just me, any translator, if Maharaj had a doubt that the translation was not quite exactly as it should be, he would stop the translator and say, "What did you say?" So the translator had to repeat. And he would say, "Yes, that's right." Or, "No, that's not what I meant." And he would correct it. It happened to me once or twice. But it so also happened that he said, "You were right." But after that, not once did he ask me to repeat. That was his reaction. He knew something had happened. And he also acknowledged later that that was the transformation. That's what happened.